Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to determine what's a better dividend stock to buy, PepsiCo or Intel Corporation. I know these are two different stocks. One is a semiconductor company, the other one is a beverage and snack company, but I'm looking at it from a perspective of a dividend stock investor. If I'm looking for passive income, if I'm looking for dividends, which one am I going to be better off going with for the next several years? Am I going to be better off going with Pepsi stock, or am I going to be better off going with Intel stock? So, understanding, knowing that these are in two different industries, but looking at it in what they have in common is a dividend payment, let's try and see which one is the better dividend stock to buy. To start with, the first metric I'm going to look at is revenue growth quarterly. And on the top here, I have Pepsi, and Pepsi's doing really well since the COVID pandemic outbreak. Their snack division did really well as people were spending more time at home, and so sales have been higher, and they've stayed higher, right? 8% quarterly year-over-year revenue growth. That's really high for a company that's been flat-ish revenue growth for the last decade or so. To be growing at 8%, Pepsi investors will take that all day, every day. Intel is, kind of having a mixed result from the pandemic. Their sales boomed initially as people staying at home bought more electronics, computers, they built out their home office and things like that. But then those are things that once you buy it, you're not buying it again for several years. And so that kind of pulled forward sales, and now in its most recent quarter, sales decreased by 20%, which is not usual for the company. If we go back to before 2014, they've been, steadily growing. They've had several quarters of above double-digit growth, but you know, uh, better revenue growth than PepsiCo uh, from Intel going back a decade. So if we're looking at the next, 2 quarters, maybe PepsiCo does better in terms of revenue growth. But if we're looking at the next 2 years, if we're looking at the next 5 years, I suspect Intel will deliver better revenue growth. And revenue growth is important for dividend investors because that allows, of course, if you're profitable, it allows profits to expand. You leverage your fixed costs, and that excess profits can go towards dividend payments. All right, the next thing I'm going to look at is operating profit margin, TTM, which stands for the trailing 12 months. And again, similar story here where Intel had been doing considerably better than PepsiCo until the most recent quarter, right? When sales have fallen and so did its operating profit margin. But longer term, it had, PepsiCo averaged around a 13%, I would say, operating profit margin, where Intel was, consistently above 24%. So I would give the advantage again to Intel over the longer term. Shorter term, PepsiCo probably might be better off in the next 2 or 3 quarters, but longer term, I would say Intel is better here. The next thing I want to look at is earnings per share. Like I mentioned, dividends are paid out of earnings. So what I want to see with dividend stocks is a consistent or growing earnings per share. And for Pepsi, it was relatively consistent, flat-ish earnings per share, fluctuating recent quarters as the pandemic boosted its sales. For Intel, we could see an upward trend in earnings per shares from 2014 if we exclude this most recent tick downward from, again, the headwinds of that sales pull forward. So longer term, again, I would give the advantage to Intel in terms of earnings per share. Finally, if you're a dividend stock investor, one of the more important things you want to look at is the dividend yield. And in the purple here, Intel's robust dividend yield of 5.6% is more than double the 2.48% of PepsiCo. So a nod here for Intel taking the lead in terms of dividend yield. The next thing I like to look at is the payout ratio. This measures the percentage of earnings a company is paying in dividends. And in this metric, the lower the better. And again, Intel wins in this regard at 44% compared to 62% for PepsiCo. And the last metric I will look at to determine which one is the better dividend stock to buy for 2023 and beyond is the valuation, the price to earnings ratio. And PepsiCo is trading at a price to earnings of 26, while Intel is at a price to earnings of 8, just a little under 8, and it's the lowest it has traded for going back before 2014. Meanwhile, PepsiCo is near the highest it has sold for going back to 2014. So Pepsi is considerably more expensive. Okay, so to answer the question, which one is the better dividend stock to buy? Intel was Intel was better on several metrics, and it's trading significantly cheaper than PepsiCo. So this one seems like a rather easy decision for me. If I'm a dividend stock investor looking out for the next 5 to 10 years, I would say Intel Corporation stock is the better one to buy right now. All right, so that's all I've got for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now.